So you're a creative and you're trying to debate if you should upgrade your computer or buy a new one. And today, what I want to be talking about is Macs versus PCs and the pros and cons of each system. So at the time of recording this, the Mac Studio was just released. Now, this is giving a little bit more hype around the Apple Silicon now, and even though it's very promising, there are still cons and it's not as good as what they're claiming it to be. And a lot of the data that you see out there for these Apple Silicon chips are a lot of these Apple fan people and also just kind of people not giving it a real world test. So they're just running all these different benchmarks and seeing what the benchmarks do, but in reality, they're not showing you what it's doing in Premiere, how it handles with like noise reduction or any of these other effects, and even when it comes to render times. So Apple is claiming that their chips outperform while being more efficient than some PC components, which is true on the efficiency end, but the performance is what a lot of that is just going to be overhyped. And a lot of these tests that you see online are coming from these Intel-based comparisons, so we're going to be comparing it to PC with an AMD processor. The MacBook that I have is the MacBook Pro with the M1 Max chip in it. It has the 32 gigabytes of RAM and 24 cores of GPU, which whatever that means. And then the PC that I have is a custom built PC. It has a Ryzen 9 5900X, a 2070, and 64 gigs of RAM. So on paper though, having that 64 gigs of RAM might seem like it's better, and it can be, but Apple's claiming that their 32 gigabytes of unified RAM acts as 64 gigs of dedicated RAM. Having the 2070 as well is kind of what is compared to the M1 Max. The now M1 Ultra is compared to the 3090, but having the Max in here, just all the different performance and everything that you see online, they do compare to the 2070. So having a PC over a Mac is you could actually custom build your PC for fairly cheap. With the market now, the GPUs are pretty high, but you could build like a $1,500 computer that will perform just as well as these new M1 Silicon chips are. You could go onto a site called PCPartPicker.com, and in there you can put a list of your components together. It's going to tell you the wattage, it's going to tell you if the parts are compatible, and it's just going to give you all this different information, and especially like where you could buy them and for the cheapest that you can buy them at. And building a PC can be cheaper than buying a Mac. The only difference is now you're going to have to learn how that PC operates, how to put it all together, install the softwares, and you're going to have to learn a little bit more about PC and more into like IT savvy, just in case if something ever goes wrong, then you are responsible for repairing that. It allows you to upgrade the PC down the line, which that's what I've been doing. My computer I built in 2019, and from then it's pretty much a whole different computer to now. Except for the graphics card. The graphics card is the only thing that's the same from 2019, just because of the prices of GPUs at this time. And going with a PC as well is you can game on this PC. It's not just going to be for content creation, you can also game on it, because you have Steam, you have all these different game clients that you can play all these different games and your AAA titles and everything, and you're going to be getting really good performance, really good FPS in those games while being able to content create as well. The downside of a PC though is what I was mentioning before. You have to have a little bit more knowledge when it comes to computers. If something goes wrong, you have to fix it. And there's so many threads out there, and with being PC, you're on Windows base, and there's so much people out there and so many people that can actually help you. There's different things on Reddit that you can read about and try to fix it yourself. And it does allow you to be a little bit more intuitive with the computer, and when it comes to understanding like the drivers and understanding what is causing your low frame rates or all of this different stuff, you're going to be able to understand it, you're going to be able to troubleshoot it and fix it for yourself. Now also with a PC is you have to download drivers, and you have to make sure that these drivers are going to be optimized for what you're using. If it's going to be Premiere, DaVinci, you have to make sure that the drivers are going to be the best drivers for that. NVIDIA, they like to put out drivers about once a month, and you shouldn't always update those drivers right away. You have to make sure that it's going to help the softwares that you are using. And sometimes they could conflict, so that's why you have to kind of read up on the drivers, understand what the software and the programs are that you're using to then make sure you're downloading and updating these drivers properly. So the other positive side though about having a PC is you can overclock it. Now you shouldn't be doing that with stock coolers that come with the CPUs, and you should be upgrading it to like an AIO, an all-in-one water cooling system, or just a better air cooler. But when you're overclocking though, you get more performance out of your components. So what's advertised on the box is actually the overclock speeds. And with overclocking your CPU and your GPU, it's going to give you better frame rates for gaming, and it's going to give you better render times when it comes to editing. And this is a real good plus because if you actually learn a lot about overclocking, you could push your computer components farther than what advertised is on the box. And this is just going to give you a lot more performance, gives you more flexibility in the computer, and understanding again how the computer works, you're going to be able to then overclock that PC to outperform any Mac. Now Macs are great in terms of just being a plug and play. How you get them out of the box is how they're going to operate. You're not going to have to actually understand how the computer works, and you're just going to be able to use the computer and pretty much have no issues with it whatsoever. And with these new Apple Silicon chips, they are very efficient in power. They don't take up a whole lot of power, and they still perform relatively well. This M1 Max chip in my MacBook claims that it only uses about 100 watts of power under full load. Now the whole system probably uses around 200 watts of power under full load, but that is really good when it's compared to a PC. And what really is a downfall about lower power consumption usually means that there's not going to be as good as performance, but these new Apple Silicon chips are really changing how that all operates. By having a lower power consumption, but they're still able to perform extremely well in terms of the power to performance. And with MacBooks though, especially in the MacBook Pro, MacBook Airs, you're getting a keyboard, the trackpad, and a screen all in those same systems. And that is all really good stuff as well, and again, it's just a plug and play, you don't have to worry about anything. And the new screens that are coming on these MacBooks, especially the MacBook Pro, they're very color accurate. I am very comfortable coloring all of this different footage, all the photos, and I know that the colors that I'm seeing on there is true to what it's going to be when I render them out. Now a downside to Macs is you can't overclock them. Like I said, it's just going to be a plug and play, so however they perform out of the box is how they're going to perform for the rest of their life. And that could be a downside, but with these new chipsets, it's very promising onto the future of what Mac is going to bring. Apple's always been like that higher end company where you're going to be paying a little bit of a premium to get their products. What a lot of people call it is Apple tax. Now this laptop here, I paid about $3,000 for it. It is the 14-inch, 32 gigs of RAM, M1 Max 24-core GPU. Now my PC, I've paid about $2,000, and it does outperform my Mac for $3,000. But if you want to factor in the keyboard, the headphones, the mouse, the monitor, we're sitting around $3,000 equally. So either way, you are going to be spending about the same amount, but what really comes down to is what your needs are for the computer. If you want to be gaming on the computer while content creating, PC is your go-to. But if you're just going to be content creating or coding or whatever it may be, and you don't want to game or not planning on gaming, then the MacBook is your choice. The other things that you need to look at though are power consumption. So the new MacBooks with the Apple Silicon, they are very, very efficient. So that's good for your electrical bill. My PC that outperforms the Mac takes about 500 watts of power under full load. Like I was mentioning, the Mac is about 200 watts. In terms of your electrical bill, Macs are a great way to go. Even the new M1 Ultra, I think it only has about a 380 watts power supply, and it's rated to only consume about 300 watts of power under full load. That I still have not seen a lot of scores for, and comparing it to the system that I have, but that sounds very appetizing. It's really hard to not try to go and use that system. But I'm a gamer, I can't give up PC gaming. After you go PC gaming, there's no turning back. You can't go back to console. So I do want to throw in a real world test into this mix. So I just recently did some corporate work for a company that I work with every now and then, and I rendered out a 49-minute long video. Now that video had DJI Air 2S footage, it had a EOS R footage, and also it had an A7S III footage. I recorded everything at 10-bit 422 in 4K, and both machines handled that stuff very well. Editing all of that on my Mac, I had a few frame drops on it, but editing on the PC, no frame drops whatsoever. But in terms of render speeds, the MacBook did it in, hold on one second. The MacBook did it in 32 minutes and 53 seconds. This was recording at a VBR at a 16 megabytes per second. Now the PC came in at 21 minutes exact. So you can see there that there is an 11-minute difference, which is really big, and that's a really big gap in terms of the performance and render times. If you need to be rendering stuff out quick, the PC is going to do it a little bit faster. Now, could it be because there's only 24 cores of GPU in there? Maybe. I don't know if the 32 is going to do it a little quicker or not, but the PC takes that in the long run. Now my PC does also have 12 cores versus 8 cores. I know it's 10 cores, but it's really 8 performance cores that it's using. And that's using 12 performance cores. There aren't any efficiency cores in my PC, so the systems get to use the entire CPU when it's rendering out. So Apple does claim that the M1 Max is just as good as my PC, but I think it comes down to that it's a desktop. It's going to have a little bit more cooling. So having more cooling allows the computer to actually push itself a little bit further and just be able to optimize itself at those perfect temperatures. MacBook is a laptop versus a desktop, and the desktop usually will always take the lead in it just because of all the cooling performance that it gets. I will give Apple a little bit more of a point because it is more of a minimalistic setup, especially with this new M1 Studio, where you get a very efficient and very powerful computer that lives on your desk, and it's very tiny and it's very minimal, which is very appetizing now for a lot of people, including myself. But I just can't give up the performance of a PC. So what you need to take into consideration to make a decision is, are you going to be gaming on it? Or is it going to be strictly for content creation? Do you want it to be a little bit more efficient, or do you want it to be more powerful? So the clear decision for you is, if you're going to be gaming on it, you have to go PC. But if it's just going to be content creation and you like the minimalistic look, go with a Mac. But what my true opinion is, though, is if you can only get one computer, then to go with a PC. You can go on PC Part Picker, like I mentioned before, and just put a whole list of the components together, make sure they're compatible, and see what their power consumption will be. So you can upgrade the PC later down the road, so then this could keep it all up to date with all the latest cameras that you're using or all the different footage that you're doing. And you could actually save money down the road, because a MacBook might last you 3 or 4 years before you want to upgrade, while a desktop that you custom build could last you for 10 years because you upgrade a component once a year or something to keep it up to date with everything. And that's what I have been doing, and it's been working great for me. The reason I did get the MacBook, though, was because I was in the market for a laptop, and the M1 Max just seemed like it was going to be a good computer for me to have, especially to have just on the go. I'm an iPhone user, so it works out that I could airdrop things to myself, and a lot of the people I do work with, they do have Macs as well, so it just makes it easier to airdrop things or pick up a project if it's in Final Cut. But it just seemed like it was the right computer for me, even though I'm a heavy PC fan. I really hope this helped you in your decision-making process. If it did, give it a like, consider subscribing, and I hope you have a great day.